Okay, welcome everyone to the Dominican Studies Book Club with CCNY Dominican Studies Institute, Professor Anthony Stevens Acevedo, Sara Ponte, and Jensen Ortiz, who are both librarians in the Dominican Studies Institute. Today's conversation is going to be about introducing you to the archive that the library has on the first Blacks in the Americas. And I am going to pass it on to Jensen and Sara Ponte and Professor Stevens Acevedo will be taking over. Yo me voy a quedar calladita. I believe it's going to be an interactive. If people have questions, you guys let the folks know how that works as you go along with the convo, okay?
Muchas gracias, Angie. Buenas noches, buenas tardes. We would like to thank Angie Abreu, co-founder and executive director of the Dominican Writers Association, and to all of you for being here today. We're going to share the contents and purposes of one of the digital projects of the CUNY Dominican Studies Institute at the City College of New York, the first Blacks in the Américas, Los Primeros Negros en las Américas. Colonial historian and the architect behind First Blacks, Anthony Stevens Acevedo, will be sharing with us more detailed information on the purpose, the history, and importance of this project. Pero eso va a ser al final, porque si no, no lo deja hablar. And librarian Jensen Ortiz and I will give you a brief overview of the platform, its many components, and how to approach it. And at the end of our conversation, then we can have a question and answer and a discussion. Jensen?
Do you want me to share the screen now, Sarah? Or
Please. Yes,
okay.
Of course. Thank you.
So the core of the First Blacks in the Americas platform is formed by several sections, a set of historical thematic summaries, and a set of elements listed under the resource tab, which includes a selection of archival manuscripts and their typed transcriptions, translations, and summaries and contextual comments, a glossary, bibliography, a timeline, a historic map, a collection of photographs and images, links to other online tools, a collection of videos. Other components such as lesson plans are going to be incorporated for teachers in the future. It's also important to mention that Anthony Stevens Acevedo, who has extensive knowledge on paleography, completed the transcriptions, translations, and the contextual comments you see on some of the archival manuscripts almost in its entirety.
Yeah, First Blacks in the Americas, Los Primeros Negros en las Américas website is fully bilingual in English and Spanish. And Jensen is going to show you how you can change it to the other language.
You want to go right here on the top here, right? And you're going to hit Español. And it converts the entire site into Spanish.
It has exactly the same information as the English version, and it works exactly in the same way. And from the resources button in the menu bar, we can access what we consider the crucial set of elements of this website, the archival resources, which include 71 packages of manuscripts. Please notice that when you hover over the thumbnails, a description of the manuscript will pop up. Let's begin, for example, with document manuscript package number 3. Right there. Thank you, Jensen. From the year 1500, that refers to the first recorded Black person to arrive in the Americas. His name was Juan Prieto or Juan Moreno, a free young Black man that accompanied Colombus to La Española in 1492, and in this document appears as still residing in La Española. This document reconfirms the fact that free Black people arrived very early on in La Española, as opposed to only enslaved individuals. So from day one, we have a Black man together with the Europeans going to what is today the Dominican Republic and Haiti.
Other themes that are featured in other documents include social existential agency by Black people, resistance and rebellions against slavery, economic role of Black people in the colonial society, Black women's role in colonial society, imperial perceptions and notions about Black people in the colony, European settlers' views about the role of Blacks in the colony, Black people's involvement in massive smuggling practices sustained by settlers and foreigners like the British, the French, the Dutch, and the Portuguese, crimes in everyday life committed or witnessed by Black people, social attitudes of Black people about the social practices of La Española society, among others. Here are some examples of these themes in the documents. So I'm going to go to manuscript number 60 to talk about that one. It's on page. So this particular manuscript is important because it features an important character, an individual known as La Negra del Hospital, the Black woman from the hospital, probably a free individual that between 1497 and 1501 established the first hospital-like healing site of the colonial Americas at her own bohío or house in the early village of Santo Domingo. This document is actually from a much later date, 1695. But interestingly enough, refers to this early event, which was still remembered in Santo Domingo 2 centuries later. And that is the oral memory about this Black woman from the early 1500s who devoted herself to healing people. The next document I'm going to talk about is, we're going to go back to the first page here. Sorry, here we go. So this document is also very important as it refers to the first recorded authorization by the Spanish Crown in 1501 for the introduction of enslaved Blacks into the new colony under the condition that they be already Christianized. Jews and Moors and the newly converted in general were explicitly forbidden to go to the Americas during this time. This document marks the recorded beginnings of the Black enslavement in the Americas.
And if you notice, if we go to manuscript number 7, Jensen, please, if you notice, all these documents have different components. And as soon as Jensen opens it, I'm going to show you. It has the manuscript, the original archival source. It has the transcription done by Anthony Stevens Acevedo. It has a translation also by Anthony. And it also has a commentary about the document and the importance of that document to today's history and society. And then it has a manuscript and the transcription next to each other. So people can compare what Anthony transcribed. Okay, so now let me talk to you about manuscript number 7, which is a document from year 1503 that highlights another important aspect of the lives and history of these early Black settlers in the Americas. Resistance against slavery in the form of running away, what we may consider the beginnings of maroonage, cimarronaje. It is a communication from the Spanish crown referring to having received a request from the crown's colonial government in Santo Domingo, Nicolás de Obando, asking the sending of Black slaves to be stopped because they were running away practically immediately after forcefully being brought into the island. The crown honored this request for a few months, ordering the suspension of the sending of slaves, but the demand for forced labor was so great in this still economically precarious young colony that Governor Obando himself will soon revert his own request, subsequently asking for the renewal of the supplying of Black slaves to the colony he was in charge of. 1 year after, in 1504, is document number 16, which contains the first recorded permission. If you can go there, Jensen, please. Contains the first recorded permission by the Spanish crown for the important enslaved Black women to La Española in response to requests from the settlers in the island. In this document, they say that they need Black enslaved women to come to La Española. So these Black enslaved men settled and stay quiet, y que se aplatanen, if we say it in today's Spanish.
So the last document we're going to talk about is number 19, which has some significance this year. Let me go. Just a second. Here we go. Okay. So this is a very important document that dates back to January 1522, for it contains the earliest ordinances or laws about Black people in La Española that have survived. The manuscript mentions the first recorded Black rebellion in the Americas, which occurred in the vicinities of Santo Domingo in Christmas of 1521. The following year, the Crown increased punishment prescribed in the 1522 laws. However, it did not stop the open resistance by Blacks. And this is really important because Anthony Stevens Acevedo also published a monograph talking about this particular document, really expanding on it this year, because this is the 500-year anniversary of the first slave rebellion in La Española. That being said, the other document in the website contain, more revealing information on the lives and struggles and resilience of Black Africans ancestors in the Americas.
And Jensen, you can also put in the chat whenever you have a chance the information about where to find the publication that you just mentioned by Anthony Acevedo, that was published as a research monograph by the Dominican Institute, and it's been translated in the Dominican Republic. I think it's already translated and it's going to be published pretty soon, but Anthony can tell you more about that. And we are still going to commemorate these 500 years. And there is a big conference being put together by the Institute and other institutions, and it's going to be happening at the beginning of December. So please stay tuned. So now briefly, let's look at other important components that we have included in the resources section. And we begin with the glossary. The glossary describes the meanings of some of the words in the manuscripts that present an old Spanish spelling or maybe no longer in use in standard contemporary Spanish. And we want people to understand what this word meant. A bibliography, and as a librarian, I am much into the bibliography. It includes a list of books, book chapters, articles, and other sources related directly and indirectly to La Española's Black population in the 16th century. Some of the items listed open up their full text whenever available online in an open source environment. As we speak, we are trying to update the bibliography. And if you have any sources that we do not include, please let us know and we will gladly include them. Another important section is the timeline. This timeline includes the main facts organized by decades about the early Black inhabitants of La Española that resided in the colony between the 1490s and the 1610s, as they appear mentioned in the documents. The timeline does not look very appealing, perhaps, but it has crucial information. And in the future, we would like to make it more interactive. So stay tuned for that. The other section is the maps. And it's a collection of maps of 16th century La Española, many of them rarely seen before, is included as well. For some, we have obtained the rights for public reproduction. For instance, map number 4 from 1560, that includes the island of La Española with a great number of geographical names. For others, we're using links that lead to the items wherever they are hosted. For instance, map number 12. If you go to that map, it's going to take you to another database and with all the metadata. This one is hosted at John Carter Brown Library website, and we're sectioning through a link.
So I'm going to go back to the site, and I'm going to talk about the images that we have available through First Blacks. Here's the image gallery. There's a total of 111 images and photographs in this section of historic sites of today's Dominican Republic where the lives of the 16th century Black inhabitants took place. For instance, we have the colonial walls of Santo Domingo, which is one of many entrances into the city from the city ports at the time, and this photo was taken by Anthony Stevens Acevedo. Next, we have videos, which is a series of videos depicting a number of moments of contemporary Afro-Dominican folklore, expressions, and practices. Today, all of the videos currently included in the site have been borrowed from the Videoteca Chango Prieto, which was a digital archive and a resource compiled by Dominican ethnographer Soraya Aracena, who gave us the permission to link these videos from her digital archive. Next on the resources list here, we have links, as Professor Aponte mentioned earlier in the presentation, to other resources related to slavery and African diaspora and slavery in the Americas as well.
All right, so finally, we have included a link to our own Spanish Paleography digital teaching and learning tool, also created by Anthony and a team of young and seasoned researchers. The Spanish Paleography tool is an NEH-sponsored project that the CUNY Dominican Studies Institute developed a couple of years ago to teach how to decipher and read the often cumbersome 16th century handwriting styles. If you can go quickly to the site, Jensen, we can show how it works, because it's important, especially if you want to learn how to read these documents like a pro, like Anthony does. So if you go to one of the documents, we can show you how it works. We have 40 documents there with, Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong, 4 different types of writing, handwriting.
Yes.
Beautiful. So this document has all of them. They have a brief description and with an alphabet and the manuscript and the transcription next to each other. The alphabet is directly related to the document that we're showing now. So if Jensen, you can take away the description, we can go to the manuscript. And if you hover over each one of the letters, it's going to tell you what it means. So it's like that. And this was a lot of work. It took many years in the making, but it's a very important source, not only for learning about colonial history from the Dominican Republic and La Española, but other colonial histories. You can learn how to read these documents here in this website and then go to study colonial Mexican history or colonial Colombia history, because their handwriting were the same during those years. It's a great tool available to everybody. Okay, so if you go back to the site, Jensen, these are the main components of the first Blacks in the Americas, Los Primeros Negros en las Américas website. We hope you find it useful, and we hope you now share it and use it and share it with the world. Muchas gracias, y ahora vamos a escuchar de Anthony. Now let us hear from Anthony.
Anthony, before you start, you want me to leave the screen here? First Blacks?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Well, thank you to the Dominican Writers Association for inviting us. By the way, if you notice some kind of a weird accent in the way I speak, it has to do with many places where I have lived. I was born in New York City 65 years ago. Well, 65 and 11 months years ago. And I grew up in the Dominican Republic in San Pedro de Macorís. And then I left when I was 16. I spent many years, about 10 years, studying and living in Spain. And then I came back to my town, New York City, when I was 27 years of age. So the mix of accents that you will listen to or feel, don't bother with that. Focus on whatever I have to share. That's the reason. So I call myself a New York-born Dominican immigrant because I was born here, but my life experience has been that of an immigrant. In any case, I always mention that because I know the accent thing always calls people's attention. And sometimes it distracts us from whatever we are discussing. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to share a little bit, some insights in terms of what the First Blacks in the Americas project means and what it took to construct it. Please forgive me if my comments sound a little bit disconnected or loose, but I'll try my best. The first thing I would like to refer to is the contribution altogether that this website does. Also, in parentheses, in passing, if I sound sometimes somewhat between proud and arrogant, please forgive that as well, because it has to do with all the work that this teamwork that this effort took, which from people from a very particular community and social setting and background. And sometimes I feel that the effort that this site entailed has not gotten maybe all the acknowledgement it deserved. So, you know, when you feel like that, there's a tendency to do some overkill in terms of how pleased and proud you feel about what has been done. But altogether, you know, it's not really arrogance. It's just the need for self-affirmation in terms of the dignity of what you and the community you come from deserves. Okay. The website does a very unique contribution. It has, for the first time, brought together, as Sarah and Jensen were explaining, a package of documents that had never been published in such a fashion before, anywhere, neither in the Dominican Republic, neither in the United States, nor anywhere else in the world. Why? Because this is a package of documents that refer specifically to the historical experience, the life, the struggles of the earliest direct ancestors of Black people of the Americas that we have a historical record for. That is to say, these documents refer to the arrival, the struggle, the work, the living, the dying of the first generations of Black Africans or people of Black African descent that arrived in the first European colony of the Americas, which, as you know, was the place and society that today is known as the Dominican Republic. In the sense that the island of La Española, the island that the Europeans, the Iberians, the Spaniards, baptized as La Española, which used to be called Haiti by the indigenous Native American local population, today is shared by the Republic of Haiti as well as the Dominican Republic. But at the time, in the 16th century, when the first colonial settlement was established. It was basically a Spanish colony in the Americas, the first one. And because it was the first European colony in the Americas in modern times, this was also the place where the first people, the first Black people, the first Black settlers, the first Blacks from either Iberia, the metropolis, Spain, and Portugal that had conquered and were colonizing, you know, a large segment of the Americas, including what we call the Caribbean today, as well as Africans that came directly from Africa, brought as part of the slave trade established and organized by the Europeans as a means to bring labor force to work in the new colonies. That gathering of documents specifically referring to this early Black population had this particular first Black populations of the Americas in modern times had never been done before. There have been studies, as you all know, there's a huge scholarship of Latin American colonial history, a big scholarship about Caribbean historical scholarship, but nobody had yet put together online these types of manuscript, a systematic collection that, as Jensen and Sarah were saying, happens, its main peculiarity as a collection, as a selection of documents, is that it brings together not only, it brings together the piece that usually is, for a number of reasons, left out of history books by historians, which are the manuscripts, the archival documents from which historians gather and glean the historical information. So this collection has the manuscripts. We produced what is called transcriptions, that is typed versions of those manuscripts. And we also included commentary about those documents so that readers would get a sense of what was the historical content, where and when these documents were written, as well as translations. And in here, I'm going to divert a little bit, referring to the translations, because it allows me to make a comment that I intended to make later on in the conversation, which has to do with what I humbly describe as some kind of scholarly or institutional daring, if you want. I think all the members, okay, the team that produced First Blacks in the Americas was and is a very heterogeneous group, a very peculiar group. It's formed by Dominicans and Dominican Americans of different generations and of different first languages or dominant languages. Some of us are Spanish-speaking, Spanish dominant. Some of us are English dominant. Some of us are sort of in between, as it happens so often in immigrant communities like ours. And I wanted to refer right away to this daring that I was referring to, because it took some hard decision to understand that if we were to compose and publish a platform that for the first time would offer this very unique assemblage of archival documents about the first Black ancestors of Dominicans and the first Black ancestors at the same time of all people in general, of all people of African descent in today's Americas, you know. And we are New York, we are New York residents, and part of, and the Institute is part of a New York public higher education institution like CUNY. The documents needed to be translated. Now, translating Spanish from the 16th century is not a task that you can easily do without some prior training. You need some, let's say, high level of knowledge of 16th century Spanish, and you need to have some good level of English dominance when it comes to writing. In our case, we had people with both types of skills, and but still you needed somebody who was able to read the documents in their manuscript form in order to translate them into English. And it just happened that I felt that I knew enough English to take a first, how do you say, take a first stab at the exercise, and then with the assistance of a professional English dominant English writing editor, we could compensate. So I refer to this non-academic element as many others that I think are involved in this project, because it helps understand how it happened and maybe even why. And it would have taken, we concluded that it would have taken a lot of resources and money, which the Institute did not have at the time for that purpose, to hire a good team of, let's say, English language scholars that would have been willing to engage in translating these texts. So oftentimes when I think about that experience, about that decision, okay, we can try to construct the first level of English translation based on these 16th century Spanish manuscripts. And then we will pass it on to an English language editor that will be able to take a second look at the text, at the translation, correct or improve the style. And if there's any issue with the conveying of the meaning of the original Spanish documents in this attempt of English translation done by a group of Dominican Americans in Upper Manhattan at a place called CUNY DSI within the City College campus, we felt that could be solved. And every time I think about that daring, you know, I think it's no coincidence. And this takes me to another aspect that I wanted to refer to, which is the social political history behind the construction of First Blacks in the Americas. But before I lose my thread, going back to the daring, many of you probably knew a Dominican, a senior, now gone, the Dominican activist and folklore and Dominican folklore educator called Normandia Maldonado. Normandia's life and experience is material for a 3-hour documentary and more. And actually, CUNY DSI, the CUNY Dominican Studies Institute, about 10 years ago, when Normandia was still alive and vigorous, produced a documentary based on an interview that we made with her. at her home in Washington Heights on Amsterdam Avenue. And one of the many things that Normandia, a woman that I think I remember did not complete high school, neither in the DR or here, I think, okay, definitely a non-college educated lady. Normandia was a genius in her own way, in the ways she understood the circumstances of the immigrant Dominican community and things that she felt needed to be done to improve the quality of life of that community. And given that she was a folklore educator or pedagogue, if you want, that experience was pretty much connected to also what at the time we used to call, this is 30 years ago in the Dominican, 40 years ago in the Dominican community activism, activismo comunal, activismo comunitario. So one of the things that Normandia did was to produce her own TV commentary, community commentary show. And what Normandia did was that she somehow learned how to set up a video camera in front of yourself where you're sitting at a table at home and have a mic somewhere and look at the camera, say whatever you wanted to communicate, and then at some point turn off the camera, and that was it. She would take that video to the Manhattan Community Network, a TV network on cable that had begun at the time. And Normandia, a non-college educated woman, had the daring of having her own TV program on a weekly basis. I always remember that because when I first saw Normandia on TV, I said, this is a woman to reckon with. And later I met her, and somehow that witnessing of what Normandia and other Dominican immigrants and immigrant activists of her generation, people that arrived in New York City in the early 60s, or the daring they carried, the daring that drove their capacity to organize the Dominican community collectively and knock the door and talk in the face to the established New York political powers at the time was something really admirable. And the more time has gone by, in my case, as a historian, as a community member, I have my admiration for that has grown. And I think that while we were doing First Blacks in the Americas, all the concerns about how good the products would be at the end, the fact that we were doing that with homegrown resources from the Institute, the staff of the Institute, the students that joined or participated in the Institute as research assistants, that was it. One other aspect of the profile of that team that produced the First Blacks in the Americas, and again, I'm going out of my own outline, but forgive me. I just hope you get the idea. Another feature of the let's say academic profile of the team that produced First Blacks in the Americas is the fact that none of the direct participants and constructors and workers that built the First Blacks in the Americas platform were people with doctoral degrees. Within the US academic higher education, either public or private world, that is an anomaly. And ever since I've been reflecting of what that experience entailed, this is something that has become more kind of evident and at the top of the page, if you want, in my own reflection. And I tend to share it every time I try to give a sense of what the First Blacks in the Americas was. That is to say, this was an exercise of scholarly work that was able to produce high enough of a quality of a product so to be accepted and respected within the US and international higher education setting and academic setting, even when the group, the team that during about give and take year here and there, it took about 8 years to complete the project since the very day when we began until we launched it on December 2nd of 2016 at City College. The work was not absolutely continued, or continuous, but it took about 8 years in and out to construct it, with some interruptions and so on. So here you have an academic educational platform that is daring to produce something, in this case, a package of historical sources in the forms of archival documents, images, maps, and so everything that Sarah and Jensen referred to before, and daring to do it, even when, except for the Institute's director, who was the ultimate supervisor of the projects, all the other people that took our sleeves up to do this work during those years were individuals with certain different degrees of college training, but no PhD experience or complete education, which goes to say, and this is something, an issue that concerns me a lot, and I bring it up here because I think it connects a lot with a lot of working class immigrant communities like the Dominican community still is today, maybe until future generations of Dominican go up in the social ladder of opportunity of America, right? And then it becomes a middle class, or more or less middle class, average type of social constituency in the United States. So far, it's not yet the case. So here you have that a group of people coming from that community setting develops the daring and the awareness, if you want, convinced by the fact that this was a historical information that needed and deserved to be put in the hands of the public, made accessible to our collective population, our communities. And we just decided that we had the minimum that it took to do it. We were absolutely persuaded that nobody else at the time, figure 15 years ago, in the United States was going to do or engage in such a cumbersome project. So either we did it or nobody would do it. That is to say, at least there was nobody within the radar of US higher education that we might have heard of that was even thinking of developing something like this. A website about the first Black people in what is today the Dominican Republic? Give me a break. Nobody was thinking about that. So because of the Institute's commitment to produce rigorous academic knowledge about the past and the historical heritage of Dominicans. Because of that, part of that commitment at some point included the decision of dusting off the forgotten, neglected, hidden history of the earliest ancestors of Black Dominicans or Dominicans of Black African ancestry. And by the way, another clarification for those that immediately after they hear the title of First Blacks in the Americas say, but how dare you say First Blacks? We know that there had been Black people in the Americas 25,000 years ago. Hey, no contradiction. We have never claimed that what we are saying means that there were not Black people in the Americas before the ones that began to arrive in what is today Dominican Republic after the beginning of the European colonizing and conquering of the Americas. No, we are not saying that. What we are saying is that those that came after European colonization began were the only ones for which an archival historical written record has survived. And that legacy deserved to be recovered. Now, what could be learned by archaeological digging throughout the continent about those ancestors of Black African origin that came across the Atlantic 15, 20, 20, 25, whatever amount of thousands of years ago, those will be discovered and further understood by archaeologists. That was not our purpose. Our purpose was, after realizing that this volume of documentation existed in archives, the decision was, let's make this historical legacy, let's make these historical sources available not only to Dominicans or Dominican Americans, but any person interested in understanding who Dominicans are and what has been the role of that enormous legacy of Black African people in Dominican society and Dominican culture until our very present at this moment that we are having this conversation. So that was the group of people that put together First Blacks in the Americas that usually is not an angle that you will hear when it comes to other academic institutional projects, more or less similar to this one. Usually you just see the names of the people and their degrees. In this case, the degrees do not include any PhD, okay? And the history behind the project is one where some senior scholars, some junior scholars, and some CUNY students, both Dominican as well as non-Dominicans, came together to produce this platform. And it's very unique. After 6 years of the website being published, I think I can say, without being too afraid of being wrong, that no similar website or platform exists, neither in the Dominican Republic, neither in New York, neither in the rest of the United States, nor in the world, or La Bolita del Mundo, as some of my friends like to say. And, you know, that entails some merit and some source of, if you want, inspiration. The fact that a community like the Dominican American community in New York City has been able to produce such a thing, coming from an angle, right, that is not the traditional one, developing a capacity to establish itself somehow within the public university system. And despite all the hierarchies and the rigidities and the turfs of power that you can find in the university system, both CUNY, SUNY, and any private university in the United States, achieving the production of such a thing is such an educational website. I think it's a matter to be reflected upon, and it should be a source of some satisfaction within all the beatings that usually immigrant communities get, and all the length of time and the struggle that it takes for those communities to be able to carve a space of dignity in American society, and in this case, in New York's public higher education system. I'm gonna just conclude by saying that, and again, I'm leaving a lot out of the description and the testimony. I'm just gonna recap, saying that in order for you to understand what the First Blacks in the Americas website is and means, and what the story is behind what you see on screen, you have to understand a history of one particular community, that is the Dominican American community of New York City. Usually that is not the case of academic platforms and spaces and research units, in that highbrow university setting in this country and elsewhere. It's just the kind of rare historical processes that I think big macro multinational cities like New York, that attracts so many immigrant populations from all over the world, sometimes allowed to happen. It's kind of an exception, and it was the result, or it has been the result, of years, at least a good 2 decades, of feverish social and civic activism in the Dominican communities in the last, let's say 35, 40 years ago, where so many Dominicans of all kinds of walks of life were involved in civic activism from whatever their angle of lifestyle, profession, and work were. Something very different than what you see today. And that environment of Dominicans, beyond and through and above and beyond whatever internal differences that were taking place at the time and still take place today in terms of ideologies, political ascriptions and affiliations, regional origins, and that kind of thing. There was a moment in those about 10 years in the 80s and 90s in the Dominican community where no matter what activism people were engaged in, across the board, what you could feel was a sense of vindication, a sense of demanding a better treatment by New York powers that be at the time, a sense of claiming dignity in the face of those that were in charge of government and public institutions, from police to the Department of Education to the hospitals. There was an environment of demanding, of claiming a space, of claiming a respect. As part of that effort, there was a group named the Council of Dominican Educators that was a mix of teachers, activists, and a few Dominicans that were stepping into becoming faculty in CUNY, that put together an educational agenda about the Dominican community, in this case, higher education, and went to the university and combined with another very important development in the Dominican community, which was the achievement of the first formal electoral Dominican representation at the city council. Insofar as I remember, we're able to persuade CUNY, or I should clarify and say, we were able to persuade a very particular type of CUNY chancellor at the time, who was a woman coming from California. And you know, women always have a more inclusive way of looking at everything, okay? And she happened to be an anthropologist. I was reflecting about this earlier in the afternoon and thinking about what to say here in this conversation. Well, that chancellor that was a woman and an anthropologist, you know that anthropologists are probably the social scientists with the training that opens your mind to in the biggest way to understand diversity and to develop respect for other cultures. And that's what I was reflecting. I was saying, it makes sense that it was a woman and an anthropologist, the chancellor, that sat down with the Council of Dominican Educators and understood the demand by the group that there was a need for the university to create a research unit devoted to producing rigorous, respectful knowledge about Dominican culture, society, and history. And that was the CUNY Dominican Studies Institute. Well, it was because the CUNY Dominican Studies Institute was established that the team that produced First Blacks in the Americas had a chance to end up working there. And once we were there with a mission in terms of recovering Dominican history, among other things, the idea came up about doing this project about the historical legacy of Dominicans of Black African ancestry. So usually when you talk about academic institutions and academic achievements, the social context of those, because it so oftentimes is merely immediately academic, is not referred to. But in this case, it was kind of I was going to use the word miraculous, but I'm not a believer, so better to say peculiar coincidence of senior and younger Dominican scholars, some of whom had brought in a sense of community commitment and community struggle from those years earlier, where a mass of Dominicans were protesting and organizing and demanding, you know, for the city to include them and respect them. That was the juncture. And then in the middle, you add to the soup the participating of a guy like myself that had been trained in Europe, in Spain, that decided against all odds, and I don't know how, to become a historical researcher when you know, such a profession usually is one of people that have a lot of personal, you know, intellectual memory, and people who are very intellectually organized and academically efficient. I got into that profession, into that training, as I still feel I'm a sharpshooter, a kind of intruder in the profession, if you want. And I ended up arriving in New York City at the time, back to my town. So here, there's this guy arriving at the CUNY DSI with this intense local political experience in the movement of Dominicans electing their first representatives in New York City, who at the other side of his head had still the interest for historical research and the training in paleographic reading, which is, as Sarah was referring to, the technique to read the old handwritings, okay? Without that training, you cannot read those documents. So a number of circumstances merged, came together to make the First Blacks in the Americas platform a reality. And so far, though the reception, I would say, again, I may be wrong. This is my take on it, my perception. Though the publicizing of the website in December of 2016 has not generated maybe all the acknowledgement and the welcoming formal and open and explicit responses that one would have expected, sort of, you know, from inside the team and the institution, sort of saying, well, you know, we have done, we have worked so hard in producing this thing. Let's see if the outside world acknowledges it, right? But so the acknowledgement has not been that open and that direct, except a few exceptions. For the most part, it has been very silent. Now, it just happens that when you go and look at practically all the university and research institutions websites in the United States that deal with culture and history, and particularly the cultures and the histories of Latin America, or the Black African diaspora in the Americas, and you go to the bibliography or the resources section, where, you know, the institution gives guidance to students and scholars as to what resources to find and use to learn more about one particular subject. In this case, the history and the culture of people of Black African heritage, both here in the US and especially in the Americas. The First Blacks in the Americas website appears with a link in all of them. To me, that's an indication that after 8 years, no, after 6 years of being there, after on the online, after 6 years of engaging in that sort of calculated and reasoned daring to construct this website, it seems we have begun to achieve some acknowledgement, not verbal, not open, but factual. And, you know, altogether, what now remains is the future. And the website was developed as an in-progress project, and it's just the beginning. It just covers roughly the 16th century of Black Dominicans, or the 16th century of Dominican society in terms of its earliest Black population. Now the challenge is to promote, recruit, entice, stimulate younger Dominican scholars, at least younger than those of us that constructed the website, so that the work may be continued, and that at some point we could have that this First Blacks in the Americas website becomes a full-fledged history of Dominican Blackness, a full-fledged history of Dominicans of Black African ancestry. Not only genetic ancestry, by the way, but cultural ancestry. Because some Dominicans might claim that they are not that dark, or they are not that African, but when it comes to the culture, the influence is there, okay? So with that, I'm gonna leave it, just adding anecdotally that the photographs and images collection that Jensen was referring to, that is contained in the website, comes and is connected to a much larger, he referred to a few hundred photos. On the flickr.com system, the team that built First Blacks in the Americas has uploaded I think it is close to 3,000 photos of historic sites in the Dominican Republic that pertain or relate to our early Black African ancestors. And it's an open collection. If you do a Google, flickr.com, First Blacks in the Americas collection is going to pop up. And in itself, and this is another, bluffing here, in itself, it is, and I think I'm still correct in saying this, the largest collection available online, that is to say, on the webs, on the internet, about places in the Dominican Republic that relate to the presence of generations of Black African settlers and their descendants in the Dominican Republic. Nobody has ever done such a thing in the Dominican Republic. Apparently, nobody in the educational and cultural elite has been interested in doing that. Nobody had done it in the Dominican community here. Nobody had done it in the entire higher education, humanities and social sciences environment in the United States, nor in the planet. This group of Dominicans from Upper Manhattan decided at some point that it was time for us to have a source that could be that could nurture learning for our young people and everybody else, Dominicans as well as non-Dominicans, who want to understand what the African Black legacy represents in Dominican society and culture today. And what a better tool, what a better way to begin addressing that understanding than going to the historical sources. There you have them. You don't have to go to archives now to see those documents. And if you put some time in learning paleography, which is a fundamental tool to have access to this forgotten and silenced history that the universities, including CUNY, including SUNY, including the private universities in the United States, are not offering on a regular basis as part of the general educational offering to our students, so that our students don't have an educational tool in place in terms of the regular classroom training offering to have access to this training, so that someday they can access directly the historical sources as they were written. Well, the team at the CUNY Dominican Studies Institute constructed the Spanish Paleography tool as a momentary, if you want, interactive instrument that you can use from home to gradually, if you have enough discipline, if you have enough devotion or interest in really accessing this history, okay, it's a tool that allows you to learn how to read those documents. The Spanish Bibliography tool, together with the First Blacks in the Americas, we hope have created a new window, actually a new door that did not exist 15 years ago, so that Dominicans as well as non-Dominicans or other people who are interested in understanding who Dominicans are may have an opportunity to grab that past that for so long, and for reasons that we don't have the time to analyze now, has been silenced, hidden, neglected, forgotten, disregarded, despised, and so on and so forth. And with that, thank you for listening to my long rant, but that's what I wanted to share with the friends of the Dominican Writers Association, so that we remember that intellectual products are frequently connected to the social setting where they come from, even when we don't discuss that very often. And in the case of immigrant working class communities like we Dominican Americans still are, that view, that approach to our cultural production in the United States, for as long as they allow us to engage in that production and give us the resources to produce that production. That connection is good to keep in mind because it helps us understand ourselves ultimately better. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. We want to open up the space for anyone who has questions. Thank you for everyone who is here tonight, who joined us for this very educational conversation with CUNY DSI and Professor Stevens Acevedo. Now is your chance to ask any questions you may have. To raise your hand or just unmute yourself. No questions? Oh my.
So I think,
Pauline has her hand raised. Angie.
and before
Pauline.
that, Peralta, Carrie Peralta. Hi, Carrie.
Oh, Carrie as well.
Yes,
All right.
yes. She has a question in the chat and a comment. Thank you for that. And the lesson plans, the curriculum, we're working as we speak at the different levels. We began with the elementary, middle, and then high school. And then little by little, we will also include like undergraduate and graduate lesson, like curriculum for teachers and educators to use First Blacks in their classrooms. We are in the process of reviewing them now, and the next step is trying to make them available in the website and also to include them in the curriculum of the New York Public Department of Education. So hopefully that's going to happen. And so our kids have access to this very important information and archival sources. And how to, you asked about how, if we are planning to showcase this in the Dominican Republic. We have done that since the beginning. And I think that's why Anthony was saying that he felt that it has not been received the way we believed it was going to receive. But I have a couple of theories about that, but I don't want to share them now because I want to give the opportunity to others to ask questions. Pauline, see.
No, I was just gonna, it's gonna be related to that same question. I don't know, I feel that some of what's happened is that you're preaching to the choir. You're kind of talking to the same people who already know what's going on. I think you need, I hope with these new lesson plans that there's a chance to put it out there. I think you need, this is something, I used it for my PhD. I found this extremely useful for my PhD. I don't think that you need to stick to the community. You need to, and let me say, here in the Dominican Republic, to be able to make it attractive, unfortunately, to the people who are doing intellectual work, somebody has to use it in Harvard or in Yale or something like that, unfortunately. If they or in La Complutense de Madrid, if they're not using that there, they don't feel like it's a legitimate source. Okay, so I'm thinking, you know, that it is a very legitimate source, but that's what the educational community here in the Dominican Republic sees. Okay, so I think that with the idea of I think you should do something like this in a lot of other instances. You know, in a lot of other places, you need to promote it more, but not in the Dominican Republic and not amongst Dominican communities. You need to go out and talk to other Latin American communities, show it. The Dominican, it's not just the first Blacks of the Dominican Republic, it's the first Blacks of the Americas. It's the first Black anywhere. Forget 1613. The first Blacks that came to the United States came in 1526 from Santo Domingo with Fray Antón de Montesinos. and had a rebellion and killed all the Spaniards in the city. In Lucas Vasquez de Ayllón in Georgia, in San Miguel de Guadalupe, they killed them all. Okay, so they killed all the Spanish. So this isn't, this needs to go out beyond the community. That's what I think. So I'm very happy to hear that there's going to be lesson plans that can be used in a lot of other settings, not just Dominican studies.
Claro,
Thank you.
Pauline. Thank you so much. Qué
Thank
gusto de verte. We teach and we give educational workshops related to First Blacks all over, not only with mainly with people non-Dominicans, because we believe that this should be known by everybody. So yes, we have been doing that since we began First Blacks, and we do it also with school children whom we believe are our future and our present, and we should teach them how to use primary sources, and that they also can see themselves in history and as important part of that. Quickly, I think I saw some question about an exhibit. The website began as an exhibit. We got a little grant and we put it together with Professor Lisette Acosta Corniel, who teaches at the Borough of Manhattan Community College and BMCC, and we put together a website. And Jensen, can you share the exhibit? Is in the Omeka site. It's an Omeka site now, you can see it. And we took 24 of these documents and put them together. And then from there, First Blacks came into being. Any more questions?
Did
Hello,
we
I have a
answer-
question.
I'm sorry. Did we
Oh,
answer
sorry.
all ones in the comments? I know some people are making questions in the comments, but go ahead, Rayan.
Okay, so I just want to say thank you so much for this. I had put this in the comments, but I feel like I could spend hours on the website just reading everything and soaking everything up. But my question is there any like collaborative endeavors, or how can we kind of like bridge the gap to expand this knowledge and information to the island? It's the island one, and for people who are kind of like outside of academia to be exposed to this, to know, to just kind of go on the website. Like, is there anything kind of like that to expand it to the island as well?
Thank you for the question. Anthony, you want to take this one?
As Sarah was saying, some of us have done some effort in terms of letting Dominicans in the island, in the country, in el país, as we say, know about the project since the very beginning. There were press releases, but we informed the academic circles in the Dominican Republic that the website had been created. We also informed the activists that are involved in education and in cultural heritage, so to speak. But still, I remember, for instance, that a prominent historian of the Dominican Republic, a few weeks after we launched the website, responded to the massive email that the CUNY Dominican Studies Institute sent to all its friends. And the comment was like about one line of text. I'm not going to engage, I'm not going to share what the comment said. It was a laudatory comment, I must say. But coming from an academician, from a historian, you wondered whether the reaction of the individual could have been a little more, how could I say it? A little bit more curious, or a little bit more elaborate in terms of conveying the acknowledgement as to whatever values the person found or might have found or was finding, so to speak, in the website. But in general, it's very hard. It's now 6 years later when I have begun hearing some activists in the Dominican Republic openly acknowledge that this website exists. As Sarah was saying, it's a very complex phenomenon. And I think it also has to do with the fact that altogether, in general, the Dominican public conversation is still not very much into history as a research endeavor. It's very much into history as to the struggle to determine what historical memory in general is given space in the public conversation, but not that much history as a field of knowledge where you construct new knowledge to better understand your past. But yeah, it's a pending matter. We need to be on the alert and constantly keep trying, including the so-called primary relations context with opinion makers and people who have influence, including social media influencers nowadays, so that they help us spread the word. But we have tried very hard to let them see, though we still could have some more venues to try, like writing again in the Dominican press about it and so on.
Thank you so much.
Any more questions or comments? Cindy's asking, what are your thoughts on the Dominican Independence Day, 1822?
Okay, as a historian, I'm going to say something that is going to probably blow you off the chair a little bit, but don't worry, that doesn't kill anybody. You continue living after you listen to this kind of thing. I long ago decided to pick the 16th century as my field of research because it was one of the least studied ones. And maybe also challenged by the fact that it was so difficult to study because of the handwriting reading thing. So it was a little bit like a challenge. And I haven't followed that much the study of the history of first independence. And I have my own take about the Dominican past that I admit openly, as I think all historians should, by the way, that I have those preferences. And the problem happens when you hide them, or you try to hide them from the people you're talking to or who you're writing for. But I can tell you that given the fact that the 1822 independent, the 1821, actually, I think it's 1821, independence effort by José Núñez de Cáceres, of which a centennial is being now commemorated. The project did not include abolishing slavery, and for me, that's a no-no in terms of allocating my research time to study and understand or commemorate something. So the fact that José Núñez de Cáceres had a project to make apparently the Dominican society an independent place, moving it from a colony to a self-ruled nation state. The fact that he thought about that, or he and his followers thought about that, and did not make part of the project the abolishing of slavery, the ending of 300 years of human subjugation of people of Black African ancestry in Dominican society, to me, meant that I wouldn't give that much attention to it. I understand all it means for many Dominicans as a first attempt for independence. But that's my take on it. And that's what I can tell you. There's a lot of effort now going on as we speak in the Dominican Republic to refresh and deepen the existing knowledge about exactly what happened in 1821. And it's very meritorious, an effort. Hopefully, at some point, I should read part of what is being discovered. But altogether, again, when I put that historical event in historical context, I am more interested in the independence of 1844, where apparently there was a clearer, a more sharpened notion of what a future Dominican nation would be, to embrace all Dominicans. Because as you know, the Constitution of 1844 that the Trinitario movement produced during the first independence, which happened against the Haitian domination and presence in the Dominican Republic, the state domination. That first constitution declared openly that all Dominicans were equal, that nobody would be different, of a different category because of race or that kind of thing. So it's a very democratic constitution, except that, as some historians have already clarified, that inclusion of the notion of open embracing of all residents in the country as humans with the same level of civic dignity was included because a number of Black Dominican activists at the time, when they realized that the Trinitario movement was working on putting together an independence project, apparently they heard that they were not including legal civil equality in the project. And apparently it was that protest that led the Trinitario movement to finally come up with a constitution that declared all Dominicans equal in dignity, or in rights, if you want. So that independence to me is much more interesting and meaningful than the attempt by Núñez de Cáceres in 1821, as well as then the other independence effort in 1865, when the independence-minded Dominicans rebelled against the re-invasion that had been deployed by Spain, enticed by other Dominicans like Pedro Santana, that did not believe that Dominicans had the capacity to rule themselves, afraid always of a supposedly the supposed risk of a Haitian reoccupation. And that group of Dominican right-wing conservatives went along inviting Spain to come back and reoccupy the Dominican Republic. But by the time that happened, a lot of Dominicans had already lived the experience of living without a direct domination by a foreign power, a few years of independence stemming from 1844, and they soon rebelled and expelled violently, the only way possible, the attempt of Spain and Dominican right-wing folks expelled the Spaniards and regained independence, 1865, which, as you know, is called La Guerra de la Restauración, the Restoration War, and which is the event we celebrate on August 16 every year. So those two independences for me are much more important. But again, this is my personal take, okay? As a Dominican, when I think the past, I look for inspiration in 1844 and 1865, not 1821. Though someday I should learn more about what happened in 1821.
Mm.
Anyone else? Cindy said, thank you. I wanted a confirmation on the situation. There's a lot of lies about it in DR. And sadly, it's always the argument when being xenophobic against Haitians.
The conversation about the tensions between Dominicans and Haitians, or some Dominicans and some Haitians, could take us a month and a half to really analyze.
No, no,
And,
no, un mes y medio no, como cuánto, toda la vida.
Okay, so Sarah says a lifetime. And it's so charged with ideology and with political perceptions and understanding that I am not sure whether there's a useful way to discuss it. That except for those that are on each side of the debate. That is to say, again, and this might sound anathema, but now this is the citizen Anthony talking to you, not the historian Anthony talking to you. The Dominican Haitian issue is something that I think will only be solved through political means. That is to say, I don't think there is an environment ready for a negotiated conversation that would lead anywhere. I think it's a matter of each side trying to do whatever we think on each side that needs to be done to achieve whatever goal we have. That sounds too drastic. I'm a total pacifist, but when it comes to this, I have reached that conclusion. You don't have one single issue in Dominican culture that is going to stem and provoke as heated, passionate, prejudiced, emotional conversation as the relationship between Haitians and Dominicans. So I think that's my take on it. I'm willing to talk about it with Dominicans that believe in human rights, Dominicans that believe in dignity, Dominicans that believe in justice, and Haitians that believe in dignity, believe in justice, and believe in mobilizing to construct a better society. That puts me in a position where many people, many fellow Dominicans that have different views would basically insult me and immediately label me as a traitor of Dominican nationality. Good for them, good riddance, as they say. I believe in a different approach. But again, it's not an easy conversation to have when the participants belong and are ascribed to these two polarized views that exist nowadays. And then you have this is in terms of Dominicans. Then you have a lot of international, regional, global responsibilities involved in the whole situation that we have no control of. I'm a U.S. New York born, Queens born Dominican American. I told you my story already. I think that the U.S. as an international power should be helping much more in the process, and it's not. The country where I was born, the country that I'm a citizen of. So it's very complicated. How do we persuade the U.S. political elite to give a long-term, sustained, sincere, solidarity-oriented hand to Haiti and to the relations between Haiti the Dominican Republic and the Republic of Haiti. If I had the ear of the Secretary of State of this current Biden government, for which I voted unapologetically and decidedly, I would tell the guy, the gentleman, you know, what is your department going to do to help us with this situation? But it's a strictly political thing, and I don't think the intention was to make this conversation a politicized conversation to that extreme. Though my presentation about the history of the First Blacks in the Americas project was very political, as you saw, but it's a different level of politicization. It's not party or ideology determined.
Thank you, Professor. And if we don't have any more questions, we could conclude the conversation tonight. I want to thank you all for accepting my invitation, for sharing this vital information with our platform. I certainly wasn't aware of how much information you had on this website, and I recently took a tour of DSI and I was astounded. But I'm one of those people, however, that I do make it a point to share this resource with a lot of our writers who approach us. Many of them are doing research themselves and have no idea sometimes that the CUNY DSI library exists, and I send them over because I think it is one of the best resources that we have for our history. So thank you once again for accepting my invitation.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
If you allow me, before we say goodbye, I'm realizing right now that I'm assuming that more of it is going to happen, you know, later on during the night and tomorrow as I reflect on what I said during this conversation. But one prominent mistake I did was to generalize and say that there was absolutely nobody with a PhD degree working in the team that developed the First Blacks in the Americas website. Dr. Lisa Acosta Corniel is a longtime PhD granted person and scholar, and she was instrumental in the production of the website. Maybe because for me, she's just Lisette, I forgot to make my description in a way that would more accurate, yeah, reflect that. But she was the only one, I could say that.
And yes, of course, and also Dr. Ramona Hernández, the director of the Institute, as a supervisor of all the project. Angie, nosotros también te mandamos gente a ti. We always do that too. So we have a great relationship with you. We respect so much the work you do. And thank you because it was so much needed. Y gracias a todos por venir, por quedarse, y un gran abrazo.
Yes, and I want to invite you all to take some time and visit DSI. If you haven't done so, you can ask Jensen here for a tour. Trust me, there is a plethora of resources and books, and yo me quedé con la boca abierta. So please take the time. If you have students as well, because you also do conversations with students in high school and middle school, right, yes. Sarah? That you want to invite them. And if there's a topic that you want us to cover along with CUNY DSI, do let us know, and we will. I mean, I'm planning to invite you guys back anyway because I have other questions.
Please do. We have so many projects.
If you guys have any particular project you want to research and you want to ask questions to them, you know, definitely reach out. And reach out to me because I'm just going to send you over there.
Gracias.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Buenas noches.